Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we acquire strength together. May our learning shine forth in our lives. May we not find fault with one another. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening. We are studying Karma Yoga, Swami Vivekananda's teachings, delivered in New York in 1895 and December 1895 and January 1896. Which was an extremely fertile period, extremely creative period. He was producing so many classes. There were going on at this time, on Mondays was Bhakti Yoga, on Wednesdays was Jnana Yoga, and on Fridays was Karma Yoga, and Saturdays was Raja Yoga. So the week was full of all four yogas being taught at the same time. In the morning, classes for advanced students. In the evening, classes for beginners. And this is the last of the classes for beginners, taking place on 228 West 39th Street in New York on 10th January 1895. So there were 4 days of Karma Yoga. There's actually only 8 classes of Karma Yoga, 4 for beginners. And we're reading them in the original order. 4 for beginners first, and then we're going to do the 4 for advanced next. Well, it's not the original order. Original would be advanced and then beginners. Strangely, the advanced classes were in the morning and the beginners in the evening. Karma Yoga. But we're reading first the 4 beginners classes and then the 4 advanced classes. And I think it's also helpful and wonderful to just remember Swami Vivekananda in New York at this time. Full of spiritual power. He was at the height of his power, we can say. It had fully developed, and he understood what the people needed, and he had his Ganesha. He had his Goodwin, who was taking everything down. Ganesha, who wrote down he was taking, so all these are recorded. Before that, his classes and talks weren't recorded by to that level of accuracy and skill. So we have that. And he had opened out to that universal love, shall we say, done some fascinating research. This famous letter of Swami Vivekananda, where he writes to Francis Leggett, frankincense, from England in the summer of 1896. At age 20, I was the most uncompromising fanatic, unsympathetic, uncompromising fanatic. I would not walk on the theater side of the streets in Calcutta. At 33, I can live in the same house with prostitutes and would not think of saying a word of reproach to them. Is it degenerate? Or is it that I am opening out into that universal love, which is the Lord himself? So he wrote that in the summer of 1896. Now, it's amazing. I researched a little about West 39th Street, New York, in 1895, 1896. It was part of the Tenderloin. It was not a very upright part of the city. And 39th Street in particular, West 39th Street, was known to have various brothels on the street. Right where he's living, 228, maybe that one of the apartments in his building was. Why would he write that otherwise? We think, oh, wow, he could. Not only he could, he did. The evidence suggests that actually he did live in the same house with prostitutes, but he was in that state of universal love, no word of reproach even. So, and the people came, even despite the neighborhood, they came morning and night, filling the hall. This is also the time when Vivekananda was in that kind of, this is a beautiful reminiscence from Sister Devamata about Ellen Waldo, who was his cook and his editor and his personal assistant, shall we say. And so let me read this interesting experience that she related to Sister Devamata, which Devamata then put in her reminiscences. Miss Waldo had had a wide experience in teachers. She had sat at the feet of many during her long pursuit of truth, but sooner or later, they had all fallen short in some way. So all her teachers, they had some defects, okay? Now, the fear was in her heart that this new Hindu Swami might prove wanting. She was afraid that eventually she would see that he also was a defective human being like we all are. She was always watching for a sign of weakness. It came. She and the Swami were together in a New York drawing room. It must have been these rooms where at 228 West 39th Street. The New York Swami Vivekananda knew was very different from the New York of today. The streets were then lined with monotonous blocks of brownstone houses, one so completely like every other that a visiting artist of note once asked, "How do you know when you are at home? You could as well be in the house next door." So what happened? Each of these narrow but deep houses held on the first floor, where Swamiji was staying, a long, narrow drawing room with high folding doors at one end, 2 large windows at the other, and between them, a mirror reaching from floor to ceiling. This mirror seemed to fascinate the Swami. He was fascinated by the mirror. He stood before it again and again, gazing at himself intently. In between, he walked up and down the room. Lost in thought, Miss Waldo's eyes followed him anxiously. Now the bubble is going to burst, she thought. He is full of personal vanity. Suddenly he turned to her and said, "Ellen, it is the strangest thing. I cannot remember how I look. I look and look at myself in the glass, but the moment I turn away, I forget completely what I look like." So the bubble didn't burst after all. And this was Swami Vivekananda in New York at this time. He couldn't remember what he looked like. So that sense that we all have of me as an important person, he was free of that. He was just a messenger delivering his message. And what a message it was. So coming to Karma Yoga, we're in the middle of this 4th class for beginners, which has been titled The Ideal of Karma Yoga. And as you recall, perhaps, from the last class, he was talking about fanaticism and how fanatics, it may have a great inspiration to do work, and yet, because of their fanaticism, they do as much or more damage than good. And he was talking about this idea of the millennium as some utopian ideal of perfection, or as the second millennium was coming, and of course still 100 years off, but in 1900. But this idea of that God's going to come again, and he's going to rule the universe, and everything will be perfect, and the Lion and the Lamb will live together. And this idea of perfection he breaks down. This idea that we can attain a quality here, that we can make this world perfect, he breaks that, breaks it and breaks it. We cannot make this world perfect. However, we are still called to try. And in the process, what happens? We make ourselves perfect. We grow in unselfishness. That's the goal of Karma Yoga, to make us unselfish. So let's go back to the text and see where we are. We're towards the end of this class, the ideal of Karma Yoga. Yet, this idea of realizing the millennium is a great motive power. So at first, the previous sentence was that so long as this world lasts, differentiation there will and must be. And the millennium of perfect equality will come only when a cycle of creation comes to its end. Before that, equality cannot be. So he has spent quite a bit of time establishing this idea that in this world of duality, we have the dvandvas, the pairs of opposites, heat and cold, rich and poor, pleasure and pain, etc., etc. So then he says, yet this is a great motive power, this ideal, though we may, if we recognize it's unattainable, still it's an ideal. It's a great motive power. Just as inequality is necessary for creation itself, so the struggle to limit it is also necessary. That's what we find everywhere. We find people to struggle. We're all struggling to see how we can live together, how we can arrange things in a way that we can get along well. We can help those who need help. We can. That's on my mind because today, also, particularly because we've been working with this very challenging young man who is homeless and who's been living on the streets for a long time and expressed the desire to have a home, to get housed. And it looks like on Monday he's going to get housed. But I'm just keeping my fingers crossed, but in Karma Yoga, we cannot be attached to the results. We have tried and hooked him up with a caseworker and poking the caseworker regularly and various poking. And so, but yes, if we can get him first under a roof with a place where he can bathe regularly and have regular meals, and then see about his mental health and improving all those things. So we try to limit the inequality. Nirav, could you shift over one? Because Ted is sitting right behind you, and he can't see, I can't see him. If you sit there, thank you, perfect. So the struggle to limit inequality also is necessary, he says. If there were no struggle to become free and get back to God, there would be no creation either. Interesting point. If we were not struggling to get free, there would be no creation. It is the difference between these two forces that determines the nature of the motives of human beings. There will always be these motives to work, some tending towards bondage and others towards freedom. So in Karma Yoga, we are working why? To attain freedom. That's the only motive in the highest Karma Yoga, is to attain freedom. No other motive is going to help us, because any other motive will bind us. Any motive for name and fame, or even for helping others, actually will bind us if we have expectations. This world's wheel within wheel is a terrible mechanism. If we put our hands in it, as soon as we are caught, we are gone. It's like a big machine. You get your hand in it and you're caught. We all think that when we have done a certain duty, we shall be at rest. But before we have done a part of that duty, another is already in waiting. We are all being dragged along by this mighty, complex world machine. There are only two ways out of it. It's interesting if we think about this world as a big machine, and we're like we're caught in it. And how many, if we reflect, that we think, oh, as soon as I get this thing taken care of, I can relax, right? I can relax as soon as I get my degree, or as soon as I get that tenure, or as soon as I get a good post, or as soon as I get my marriage, as soon as I get married, as soon as that's done, I can relax. And yet, did it happen? If we look back over our life, when did we think, now I can relax? Maybe it happened for a short time. We like at the end of the school year, you turn in your last term paper. I can relax. It doesn't last long. It doesn't last long. We're caught. We get caught, constantly driven to do more, do more, do more. Well, how do we do? This is the secret of karma, of work. How to work? By relinquishing the fruits. Actually, we have 3 stages in Karma Yoga. First, we relinquish, and there are Sanskrit terms for this, phala, sankalpa, tyaga. We give up attachment to the result of our action, the phala, the fruit. The fruits of our action, we relinquish the fruits of the action. Then the second stage is karma sankalpa tyaga, which is actually giving up attachment to the work itself. We do the work, but completely unattached to the work. The third, this is, and we haven't, Swamiji hasn't really touched on this much, is kartritva sankalpa tyaga, which is giving up the feeling that I am the doer, that I am doing. We even give that up, this feeling of being an agent of action, and simply be the witness of the action which is happening through my body, perhaps, but I am not the agent, I am not the doer. From the devotional standpoint, God is the doer, or from the philosophical standpoint, the gunas are doing the action, and I am merely the witness, the bystander, watching. So that may be a very high state to attain, but that's the secret of work. Swamiji is presenting to us in various ways. We are all being dragged along by this mighty, complex world machine. There are only two ways out of it. One is to give up all concern with the machine, to let go and stand aside, to give up our desires, to be, wandering monk in the Himalayas or something. Just completely let go of everything. That is very easy to say, says Swamiji, very easy to say, but almost impossible to do. I do not know whether in 20 millions of men and women one can do that. The other way is to plunge into the world and learn the secret of work. And that is the way of karma yoga. Do not fly away from the wheels of the world machine, but stand inside it and learn the secret of work. Through proper work done inside, it is also possible to come out. Through this machinery itself is the way out. Okay, so this is, karma yoga is not the yoga of going off, giving up everything. Yes, we are in the world. We will have to work. We are here. Who can truly stand aside and let go of everything and be that yogi on the mountain peak or in the cave in the mountains and do nothing but do nothing at all? Even sitting there meditating is doing something. If we're sitting in a mountain cave somewhere and meditating, we're doing something. We have to be like the avadhuta, wandering wherever, like a leaf cast off by the, and just floating around wherever the wind blows it. That perhaps is this idea of completely out of the machine. Otherwise, we're in the machine. All right. So what is the way? First step, of course, relinquishing the fruits. We have now seen what work is. It is a part of nature's foundation and goes on always. Those that believe in God, he says, those that believe in God understand this better, because they know that God is not such an incapable being as will need our help. That at that time, I think that was I don't know if they still do it, the Christian preachers. I'm not following, don't have my finger too much on the pulse of Christian preachers, what they're preaching today, but this idea, God needs your help, come help God. So Swami Vivekananda pokes fun at this. What? You're going to help God? Sri Ramakrishna himself would poke fun at this. What? You're going to help God? Insignificant worm that you are? You're going to, the infinite being in whom this entire universe rests needs your help? So think again. You may need his help. You may need her help. He doesn't need your help. Sri Ramakrishna would say, no? What will you do if you come face to face with God? Will you say, oh God, build me a hospital, build me some roads to help the poor? No. If you're face to face with that infinite divine existence who is the very nature of love, what will you say? Oh Lord, may you never disappear again from my sight. May I always be aware of you. May I have unflinching love for you. May I be ever immersed in the bliss of you. That's the only prayer that will come to mind. Not, oh, let me help you manage your creation. So, those that believe in God understand this better. They know that God is not such an incapable being as will need our help. Although this universe will go on always, our goal is freedom. Our goal is unselfishness. And according to Karma Yoga, that goal is to be reached through work. Actually, the best way to realize unselfishness is through work. By meditating, we can realize certain things. By devotion, we realize certain things. And true, at the end, all these paths converge. But when we're dealing with the problem of selfishness, it's through work that this is constantly challenged, because we're constantly working, not alone. We don't work in a vacuum. We work with others. And we are being asked to relinquish the fruits of our action. And then we are being asked even to relinquish attachment to the work itself. And yet we have to work, and we're working with other people, and everyone we know that we bump up against other people, and the sharp edges of our personalities rub up against the sharp edges of other personalities, and then gradually they get smoothed. And if we do it right, we start to learn unselfishness. We start to learn it. So it is through Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is the art of learning to be unselfish. And Swami Vivekananda says perfect unselfishness is God. And let's remind ourselves, unselfishness is, we think that selfishness people who are selfish think that that's what brings them happiness. If I can just get for me. And the secret to learn is that the more unselfish we are, the greater is our peace, the greater is our joy, the greater is our freedom. It is actually through unselfishness that we attain freedom, that we attain joy, that we attain peace. And that's what we all want, right? Everybody wants to taste peace and joy. And through unselfishness, we taste it. All ideas of making the world perfectly happy may be good as motive powers for fanatics, but we must know that fanaticism brings forth as much evil as good. He's gone over that in the previous class. We read those portions of this particular class where he's pointing that out in a very real way. And then the Karma Yogan asks, he says, the Karma Yogan asks, why you require any motive to work other than the inborn love of freedom? We all love freedom. Nobody wants to be constrained. This inborn love of freedom, let that be our motive. Work to realize that freedom. Be beyond the common worldly motives. And then he quotes the Gita, to work you have the right, but not to the fruits thereof. That is, of course, Gita. Pop quiz, anybody know the verse number? Yeah. 2.47. I wouldn't have known it either. It's written here. Karmanye vadhikaraste ma bhaveshu kadachana. You have the right. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, you have the right to work. You have the right to action, but not to never to the phala, the fruits. It's interesting, they uses the same term, this term of fruits, the fruits of action. And the second part of this verse also is important, though Swamiji doesn't mention it here. But to work you have the right, but not to the fruits thereof. So, Sri Krishna says, don't become a seeker of fruits of your actions. Don't be a producer of the fruits of your actions. Ma karma phala hetuhu. Don't be a cause of fruits of actions, karma phala. Don't cause these. Don't be a seeker of those things. But this is important. At the same time, mate sangos tvakarmani. Don't be attached to inaction. Don't think that you are fit now to be completely inactive. So it's the same teaching here in Gita. Yes, you don't have rights to the fruits. Only to the action you have a right. But then Give up the fruits. And then, yet don't be in other words, don't be lazy. Don't just do nothing. We have to act. And then, of course, Sri Krishna in chapter 4 takes it a step higher. We can look at that verse in a minute. Okay, Swamiji is going to refer to it, I think. So we human beings can train ourselves to know and to practice that, says the Karma Yogan. To practice it. It takes practice. It's not that we can automatically relinquish our attachment to the fruits of action. It's by practice. That's the practice of Karma Yoga. When the idea of doing good becomes a part of one's very being, then we will not seek for any motive outside. Let us do good because it is good to do good. One who does good work even in order to get to heaven binds him or herself down, says the Karma Yogan. This is an important idea, and perhaps all the more at that time in that milieu of the idea that there's after death we go to a good place or we go to a bad place, and we better do good things so we go to the good place. And in Hinduism also there's this idea that we do good karma, and when we reap the results of that good karma we go to heaven and enjoy heavenly realms for many yugas, as it were. But then in our idea, that also has a limit. A limited action will lead to a limited result, and we have to come back again here to the karma bhumi, the plane of work. So he suggests one who does good work even in order to get to heaven binds him or herself down. We bind ourselves down by doing work to go to heaven. It's a bondage. It's a chain. A golden chain, perhaps, but a chain nonetheless. Any work that is done with the least selfish motive, instead of making us free, forges one more chain for our feet. So it's really, the bar is set very high. So he says, the only way is to give up all the fruits of work, to be unattached to them. Let's turn to, here the editor here has given a footnote to the Gita chapter 4, verse 20. Let's have a look at that verse. Tyaktva karma phala sangam nitya tripto nirashrayah karamanyabhi pravrittopi naiva kinchit karoti saha. This is very interesting. Tyaktva, relinquishing attachment, sangam, asangam, attachment to the fruits of action, karma phala, ever contented, nitya tripta, ever complete, nirashraya, without any support in this world, taking no support here, yet, though engaged in action, naiva kinchit karoti saha, he or she does not do anything. So now we're talking about a higher level of karma yoga, actually, where we're not even doing anything, relinquishing fruits of action, even relinquishing doership. This idea of naiva kinchit karoti saha, he or she does not do anything. Know that this world is not we, nor are we this world, that we are really not the body, that we really do not work. We are the self, eternally at rest and peace. Why should we be bound by anything? Okay, here he's actually touching on this point now in this last class for beginners. We are not this world. We are not this body. In truth, we do not work. It's the bodies that work. We are the self, eternally at rest and peace. That is our true nature. So the ideal of karma yoga, to realize that through unselfishness, through unselfish action, through unattached action, we begin to realize that we are not the doer even. Let that action pass through us as we watch it go by. And we become like this beautiful verse 18 of chapter 4. Karmanya karmayah pashyet akaramani chat karmayah sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta kritsna karma krit. This is a kind of difficult to pronounce. He or she who sees inaction in action, who sees inaction in action, and action in inaction, is intelligent. Among all people, this person who can see when there is absolutely no action, nothing seems to be happening, sees the greatest action. And yet when in the greatest action is completely unmoved and no action happening. Such a person is truly wise. Such a person is a yogi and actually a doer of all action. Swamiji somewhere, he says, in the midst of the busiest street corner, can your mind be as calm as a lake unrippled by any wind? In the midst of intense action, one remains actionless. And yet, in the midst of the greatest peace, one is intensely active, affirming one's true nature as infinite peace and freedom and bliss. So why should we be bound by anything? We are the self, eternally at rest and peace. Why should we be bound by anything? It is very good to say that we should be perfectly non-attached. But what is the way to do it? What is the way to do it? Every good work we do, without any ulterior motive, instead of forging a new chain, will break one of the links in the existing chains. This is the theory of repetition. Swamiji is telling us again and again. So maybe the thoughts will enter our thick skulls a little bit, and we will try. Every good work we do without any ulterior motive, instead of forging a new chain, will break one of the links in the existing chains. Every good thought that we send to the world without thinking of any return will be stored up there and break one link in the chain and make us purer and purer until we become the purest of mortals. Yes, this is beautiful. This is a good companion sentence to that sentence in Raja Yoga, which I still remember when I first read it. I can remember where I was. I was on the subway train in Washington, D.C., going somewhere, probably going to a job or something, well before joining the monastery. I was reading Raja Yoga. I can't say whether it was in Washington, D.C. or San Francisco. Anyhow, I was on a metro train, a subway train, and I read this line from Raja Yoga: every wicked thought will rebound. And it hit me. Oh my God, even a wicked thought will rebound, because I may be abstaining from wicked actions, but Swamiji says even a wicked thought will rebound. How? In the form of some misery, here or hereafter. That wicked thought will rebound on us. If we think a nasty thought about someone, I wish, we're doing that all the time, right? Especially in the field of work, maybe about our boss. Or one of our good friends, she had a lot of trouble with her boss, and so finally she changed jobs. She got a new job, and she had a boss with whom she really got along with. But now she was supervisor of some people, and she had a lot of trouble from her underlings. So it went from having trouble from your boss, then you become the boss, and then suddenly you have trouble with the people you're bossing. So, all right, that distracted me, sorry. This idea of a wicked thought, it will rebound on us. Rather, look at this. This is the antidote. Every good thought that we send to the world without thinking of any return will be stored up there and break one link in the chain and make us purer and purer until we become the purest of mortals. Pure means perfectly unselfish. We don't wish ill of anybody, even our so-called enemies. We recognize that they're really our brothers and sisters. And we go on sending love, we go on sending compassionate thoughts, healing thoughts to the world, healing thoughts to all the people who are sunk in ignorance and doing apparently very wicked actions. We bless them also. What else can we do? Yet all this may seem to be rather chaotic and too philosophical, more theoretical than practical. I have read many arguments against the Bhagavad Gita, and many have said that without motives you cannot work. All right, it's difficult. It may be too much idealistic, too utopian. But Swamiji points out, they have never seen unselfish work except under the influence of fanaticism, and therefore they speak in that way. So he upholds this idea. And of course he had his master, Sri Ramakrishna, as an example before him. And Swami Vivekananda himself is an example for us. This kind of unselfish work, and some of his disciples say, Swami Akhandananda is a beautiful example, how he went and dedicated his life to this ideal of laying down his life for others. Who did he lay his life down for? The starving people in Murshidabad district of West Bengal, and then to the orphans. And he started an orphanage, and it became a school, and he was night and day serving them as his very own children. Even when he was made president of the order, and his president usually stays at Belur Mutt, he wouldn't stay there long. He would come for a little bit. He'd go back to Saragachi, to his orphanage, to those kids without parents whom he served as God. So most people have not seen that kind of unselfish work, so they think it's impossible, but it's possible. So now this is coming on to the conclusion of this class, and he's going to talk about Buddha. Though he doesn't give too much specific examples, so we have to actually look at Buddha's life and see, but he's going to praise Buddha as the perfect karma yogan. Let me tell you in conclusion a few words about one man who actually carried this teaching of karma yoga into practice. That man is Buddha. He is the one man who ever carried this into perfect practice. It's interesting what he's going to say next. He compares him to all the other prophets. He says, all the prophets of the world, except Buddha, had external motives to move them to unselfish action. Is it true? Let's think about it. What more does he say? The prophets of the world, with this single exception, calling Buddha also a prophet, may be divided into two sets, one holding that they are incarnations of God come down on earth, and the other holding that they are only messengers from God. Okay, we can understand. Generally, Christianity and Hinduism, we say the world teachers, the prophets are actually avatar. They're incarnations of God. And the Jewish tradition, Islam, Baha'i, Sikhism, Jainism, and Buddhism. Well, Buddhism, there's no messenger either. He's just the awakened one. We see messengers. Muhammad is the messenger. He has a message from God. He's not God himself. He's just the messenger. And the other prophets are messengers, the prophets of the Jewish tradition. And even the Christians, aside from Jesus, the others are all just prophets. They're not actually incarnations of God. There's only one in Christianity. So these are the two kinds of prophets, the kinds of... where are we? All the prophets of the world had external motives. The prophets of the world, with this single exception, may be divided into two sets. One holding that they are incarnations of God, come down on earth, and the other holding that they are only messengers from God. And both draw their impetus for work from outside, expect reward from outside, however highly spiritual may be the language they use. Well, we'd have to think about this a little. I haven't thought about this too much. How can that be if we say that impetus from outside. The messenger says, well, God told me. God is telling me to tell you all, so he's my impetus. Or I am God, come to me. Buddha, it's amazing to see how Buddha, on the other hand, as he pointed, he only said, I am awake. That's all he said, I am awake. And you too can be awake. So Swamiji loved this idea, although he didn't agree with all the doctrines, perhaps the doctrines of Buddha, and especially the doctrines as developed by the different philosophical schools which came up. Swami Swahanandaji used to joke, no, that Buddha said, no philosophy, just follow the Eightfold Path, follow the path, and awaken. And within a few years of his death, there were 20 schools of Buddhist philosophy arguing with each other. So he says about Buddha, Buddha is the only prophet who said, I do not care to know your various theories about God. What is the use of discussing all the subtle doctrines about the soul? Do good and be good, and this will take you to freedom and to whatever truth there is. He was, in the conduct of his life, absolutely without personal motives. Yes, more or less we can see Buddha taught 4 noble truths, and the fourth is this is the path, and by doing right action, right motive, right concentration, all these things, if you do these things properly, you will awaken, you will attain to freedom. And what man worked more than he? Show me in history one character who has soared so high above all. The whole human race has produced but one such character, such high philosophy, such wide sympathy. Swamiji really was a tremendous fan of Buddha. Even in during Ramakrishna's lifetime, Sri Ramakrishna was basically dying at Kashipur, and Swamiji ran off to Bodh Gaya to meditate under the Bodhi tree, along with Swami Shivananda and who else? They went 3. Okay, they went, and was tremendously inspired by Buddha. This great philosopher, preaching the highest philosophy, yet had the deepest sympathy for the lowest of animals, and never put forth any claims for himself. This point I love. Buddha never put any claims for himself. Do not call me God, do not call me anything. I am awake, that's all. And you too can be awake. Of course, he had the tremendous power to help his disciples to awaken, just to get by a look, by holding up a flower, and his disciple awakens. He's the ideal karma yogin, acting entirely without motive, and the history of humanity shows him to have been the greatest man ever born. Beyond compare, the greatest combination of heart and brain that ever existed, the greatest soul power that has ever been manifested. Wow. Of course, he has spoken in similar terms about his own master, Sri Ramakrishna. We can acknowledge that. And he has spoken in similar terms about really all the great world teachers. He said, if I had lived in the time of Jesus, I would have washed his feet not with my tears, but with my heart's blood. So he had that kind of reverence and devotion for all the great world teachers who are all really manifesting that same infinite reality, Satchidananda, the true Guru. So Swamiji goes here, just one more paragraph of in praise of Buddha, we can say. He is the first great reformer the world has seen. That's a great point. 600 years before Jesus, he came. He was a reformer, and his tremendous influence on Hinduism. What Hinduism is today is formed tremendously by Buddha, and both in assimilating his teachings and in reaction to his teachings, and with the result that Buddhism as a separate religion in India practically died out. And though it went all over the world, and it had tremendous influence, and of course became one of the major spiritual traditions, still today is one of the major traditions, tremendously influential. And in India it has come back via Tibet and the Dalai Lama, who have come back. And of course there are still in certain parts of India also the Buddhists in Bengal and Eastern India. But on the whole, as a major force in India, it died out. Assimilated, as it were, because Hinduism is this amalgamation of so many different streams, which are almost like different religions themselves. When you look at the difference between, say, the Vaishnava tradition and the Shakta tradition and the tradition of Jnana Marga of Shankaracharya, that's like three different religions, practically. And yet they're all held together in this palimpsest, as Sister Nivedita calls it, which is a parchment that has been written on again and again, numerous times. This gathering together of so many different rivers into this tremendous stream of spirituality. So he is the first great reformer the world has seen. He was the first who dared to say, believe not because some old manuscripts are produced. Believe not because it is your national belief, because you have been made to believe it from your childhood. But reason it all out. And after you have analyzed it, then, if you find that it will do good to one and all, believe it, live up to it, and help others to live up to it. Right? This is another keynote of Swami Vivekananda's teachings as well. That what is the true test of religion? What is the true test? Experience, realization. Believe not because the books say so. Anybody who says, I have seen God, but you cannot see God, you just have to accept my word for it. He says, shun such a person, avoid such a person. If I can see God, you can see God too. Everyone can see God. As that was the question he was asking when he was seeking, coming to Devendranath Tagore. Sir, have you seen God? The leader of the Brahmo Samaj at that time, highly respected as a rishi of sorts. What did he ask him? Sir, have you seen God? He was embarrassed. He couldn't say yes. He said, you have the eyes of a yogi. You should meditate. Good advice, perhaps, but that's not what he wanted to hear. And he asked other luminaries, other spiritual teachers, have you seen God? No one was ready to affirm, yes, I have seen God, until he came to Sri Ramakrishna. And he asked him, sir, have you seen God? Yes. Immediately the reply came, uncategorical affirmation. Yes, I have seen God. I see God as I see you sitting here in front of me, except more clearly, more directly, more intensely. First time he met someone who says, yes, I have seen. And moreover, I can help you to see him too. So this is the true test of religion, and Buddha, Swamiji here is saying, Buddha was the first to say this. Do not believe because your books say so. Of course, the Upanishads also say, go with the truth is beyond the Vedas, beyond this book itself. This book is pointing the way, but it is not the truth. So he says that Buddha was the first who dared to say, believe not because some old manuscripts are produced. Believe not because it is your national belief, because you have been made to believe it from your childhood. But reason it all out. And after you have analyzed it, then, if you find that it will do good to one and all, believe it, live up to it, and help others to live up to it. Powerful. And then his final closing sentence, 2 sentences. He or she works best who works without any motive, neither for money, nor for fame, nor for anything else. And when a person can do that, he or she will be a Buddha. And out of such a person will come the power to work in such a manner as will transform the world. Such a person represents the very highest ideal of karma yoga. So this is the closing sentence of his 8th karma yoga class, the 4th karma yoga class for beginners, delivered in the evening of January 10th, wasn't it? January 10th, 1896. interestingly, this idea that we can help the world, we can do good, we can actually help others. On the one hand, he breaks this down. He goes on breaking down this idea that we can actually help anyone. We only break our selfishness down and become unselfish and perfect ourselves. But then he says, when one becomes a Buddha, when one becomes perfectly unselfish, when we can work without any motive, except for doing good, neither for money, nor for fame, nor for anything else, without any motive whatsoever, if we can work like that, then we will be a Buddha. And then, out of such a person, what happens? Then comes the power to work in such a manner as will transform the world. So he does still hold out this idea that we can transform the world, but how? We have to be Buddhas. We have to be Buddhas first. So we have this idea of doing good to others, of unselfishness, and we take that up. And gradually we become unselfish. And the more unselfish we become, the more peace we begin to taste, the more we begin to be able to work effectively, the more we begin to actually be able to help others as we perfect ourselves. And when we attain to that height, as it were, that supreme state of realization, when we become a Buddha, then that power to transform the world flows through us. It is not we who are the doers then. We are not the doer anymore. But Satchidananda, the true guru, the true doer, is the Divine Mother does her work through us. So this is the highest ideal. To transform to attain to that power of transforming the world by completely relinquishing all attachment to the fruits of action, relinquishing all selfishness, relinquishing even the doership, and then we become instruments in the hands of the Divine Mother, perfect instruments. Or even unwilling instruments, perhaps, in Swami Vivekananda's case. We find that he was an unwilling instrument in the hands of the Divine Mother. We have a few minutes remaining in the hour. Perhaps anyone has comments or questions. We also have some people joining us online. If they have any comments or questions from the online, typed in the chat, we can see if we can address those also. Reading this, we get this sense of what, a little taste at least, of what it might have been like to sit in Swami Vivekananda's presence and hear these teachings, and to see before us someone who was like Buddha, praising Buddha, just incredible. And we wonder how it is, with hindsight, with this 130 years of time have passed, that we can see how this movement has expanded and how his teachings have reached all the corners of the world, and how they're bringing so much light to people. At the time, could people realize? Some people may have been able to realize. For Goodwin, he confessed to Mrs. Oli Bull, Sarah Bull, for me, he is like Christ. He has become Christ to me. So some of them did realize it. Others, perhaps, they didn't know that such a teacher comes once in hundreds of years, perhaps, with this kind of power, this kind of insight, this kind of power to transform the world. And we do see, though the world is still a mess, and it will always be a mess, but we find great light also, tremendous light in these teachings.
So Swamiji also changed India, the history of India, in the sense of that how everybody was starving and that sadhus were just living and having a wandering life, and then how this work changed everything.
No, it's a new chapter in the religious life of India, no doubt, of Hinduism and of the world. Yes.
East and West, he literally changed everything.
East and West, he was a really tremendous, he said, I have a message for the West, as Buddha had a message for the East, I have a message for the West. And he had a message for India also. And if you study, the message was a little bit different as for the need, and yet it was a universal message, of course. And now the message, India also has come moved forward tremendously. And Swamiji was also instrumental in India's gaining independence from England. All the revolutionaries, what did they have in their pocket? Works of Swamiji. Lectures from Colombo to Almora. Though nowhere does he discuss of overthrowing the British or anything like that. He couldn't have discussed that. He would have been thrown in jail. But all of them took their inspiration from Swami Vivekananda, the ideal of freedom. And how amazing. Someone writes, is this the science of freedom? Moksha Shastra. Nice. Moksha Shastra. Why not? The Shastra, the scripture of freedom. Freedom, oh freedom is the song of the soul, says Swami Vivekananda. That's the song of the soul, and through karma yoga, through all the yogas, that's the ideal that we're aiming for, freedom. So let's take a moment of silence, shall we? And just hold these thoughts in our hearts. Om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma mritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you very much for coming and giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and share this study of Swami Vivekananda. Yeah. It's a good question. Let's see. If we are to love our neighbor as ourselves, shouldn't we see all as one and do our duty in the great harmony, whether it is beneficial to ourselves, even if it occasionally benefits us personally? True impartiality. Well, of course, it always benefits us. When we are, the more unselfish we are, the more benefit comes to us. Not sure exactly what you mean.
Shouldn't we see all as one?
Mm-hmm, yeah, that's that's the highest ideal of when we see that myself is shining in my true self is that infinite Satchidananda is shining in every heart. So I'm not separate from anyone. That's true. So if I'm serving you, I'm actually serving myself, because I am dwelling in all beings, and all beings are dwelling in me. Not two nor many, 'tis but one. And thus in me all me's I have. I cannot hate. I cannot shun myself from me. I can but love, says Swami Vivekananda. So that's true. Thank you. Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma.